Okay, and we can start with the first panel. So we can welcome on stage Peter, who is the CEO of Nestlé Purina in the Nordics. And Peter, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce the rest of the panel.
Good morning, or god morgon in Swedish. So, what a nice audience, and nice to meet you all, and meet many of you already last night. What a positive vibe and what an energy that was already last night. We didn't dance yet, but let's see indeed, Kim, if we can walk dancing out of here. My name is Peter van Staalduine. I think only the Dutch and the Belgians can pronounce the surname, so I will not ask you to repeat that. I'm leading the Purina Nordics team, which is a bit like David said. The Nordics is all 5 Nordic countries, including Iceland. And I've been in the pet care business for almost 19 years. So in August it will be 19 years. Some of you said to me yesterday also, that's a really long time, and it is. I never thought when I started at Nestlé that I would be so long in the business, but I've seen it really transforming over time. It's been really moving from food to care. And everything what you are doing and you are working on is actually really confirming that how is the ecosystem being built and how the business is also going to transform over the years to come. So I feel very energized to be here with you and also learn a lot from you actually. Just a few words about First Vet, and Dave and I, we met, I don't know where David is now, but we met this morning for the first time. But I've been looking at First Vet together with Kim in the very early days because I was working with one participant also who's here today, Marcus from PES in Austria. And we were already looking at actually what First Vet was doing at the time, and I will tell you more in the lunch break about it. So I've been really following you, and I think you've done a tremendous job, and now you've built a business over time. So congratulations once again. A little bit about Purina in the Nordics. So we are the leading manufacturer in the grocery channel. So we're leading the cat and dog food market in Finland, Sweden, and we are getting close in Norway to leadership. And we just started the business actually in Denmark, which is really nice because in an existing company like Nestlé, where you're not present actually in the market, it requires a really different mindset on how to launch, how to build a business, and how to go back to the fundamentals of brand building. And there's a session also on brand building in the afternoon. And then I dare to say that we don't have numbers for that, but I dare to say we are the fastest growing in the specialist channel. So e-commerce, veterinary business, and also pet retail, because that's our next level growth engine. That's a little bit about Purina in the Nordics and about myself. So now I would like to welcome Therese, Daniel, and Ben Sam to the stage, please.
If we sit in order where
Here we go. That was a detail.
nice.
It's fine. I think we'll make it with it. That's good. Good. Maybe you want to start with a quick introduction about yourself and what you do. Maybe we'll start with you, Pensap.
Yeah. Is this okay? Too loud? No. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So my name is Vincent Solomon. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Media Group. At Media Group, essentially, we acquire and operate marketplaces for rehoming pets. And that means if you're a consumer looking for, a puppy, a cat, or something, either from a breeder or rescue, you go to one of our platforms to search and find and count that pet for you. And similarly, on the other side, for a breeder or rescue, with the platform to find kind of loving homes for their pets. I think that's what you need to know about me. Married, I have a 2.5-year-old son, live in Stockholm. This is the best it's ever been. Enjoy it. It doesn't get out of this.
Great. Is this okay? Too loud. So my name is Therese. I'm a venture partner for Världinvest, covering the Nordic region. I'm based out of Stockholm. Världinvest is a family-backed investment company based out of Brussels, but with offices in the US, in Asia, and across Europe. And we invest across multiple asset classes. So we cover venture capital, growth equity, and we also do buyout and buy builds, so later stage. Yeah.
Wonderful. My name is Daniel Rubin. Great to meet you all. I wear many hats. I work on the future of food, so I run a newsletter called Food Tech Weekly. I support a couple of VC firms in the space. I'm a mentor at a couple of accelerators. I advise a bunch of startups. I've angel invested in 30, and since last year I run Solvable Syndicate. We're a group of 200 angels all over the world investing in early stage impact food tech and ag tech. And of course, pet food has a massive environmental footprint, and that's why we're interested in this space, to see if we can help reduce that environmental footprint.
Thank you. I've got to say something before in my opening. So your badge at the end, if you want to hand it back, we have a nice goodie bag for you to take home with some local and some international products from Sweden, from Nestlé, and also some international ones. So I completely forgot that. So let's start with the first question. So what makes, I think one of us needs to mute. Oh, yeah, sorry. I think we need to mute when we are not talking, otherwise we get the end. So maybe you start with you, Ben Sam. What made for you and your company the pet sector so attractive to add to?
So that's an interesting question. I mean, I think we're unusual in the sense that we're not just an investor. In the panel here. So I was actually questioning why I got an orange badge yesterday. So we acquire marketplaces so that we can operate them and make them better. And then we also look at other kind of spaces within pets that kind of makes sense. But if we take a step back and why kind of marketplaces or why pets in general, it's that, there's a lot of secular trends that we're all familiar with that are driving kind of both that more and more people have pets, but also that there's an increasing trend towards pet humanization, so that, it's no longer, there's a classic story of, pets a dog used to be something that lived outside to now sleeps in the bed with you, right? At the same time, it's also a sector that is very under-digitalized. So how you find a pet has been the same since it was back in the day that it was something that kind of slept outside. And so it was a need that was very clear that we all kind of saw and experienced in our own lives. And that made it such an exciting prospect to kind of, it's always cool when it's a space that you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. It's surprising that no one else has done it, and then it works out when you can try to solve for it. So, make a long story short, kind of the secular trends of demographically for pets, pet immunization, and that it's an underserved market still, even though it's so important from our perspective. That's what I was coming on.
That's from your perspective?
Yeah, so I should have mentioned before, so we're a consumer-focused investor. And within that, of course, pet is a super interesting area. We've been very active in the segment for quite some time, both investing in product companies, but also services, veterinary clinics, and different type of propositions. So as Betsson mentioned, there are some really interesting tailwinds. There's still a lot of opportunity across different geographies. In the Nordics, we've seen a lot of innovation. It is a quite mature market in the pet space, but there are some very interesting companies, not the least in this room, coming out of this region that can also you can take to other geographies. So we're still very actively looking for new investments in this segment. It's a key priority.
Daniel, you already said in your introduction, for you really the sustainability angle is really important. There's a lot of people in the room also on our side who are working really to reduce our footprint in Purina, so we recognize this very well. Can you share a little bit more on the companies you are investing in that area and why you have invested particularly in those?
I mean, we're hoping to invest in a novel protein pet food company right now. So the food system is around 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and the majority of that is linked to animal source foods. And if you look at the US, for example, 20% of all meat consumed is consumed by cats and dogs. So our beloved pets have a massive environmental footprint, and that's something we need to address. And a lot of great startups are trying to address it. So that's why me and the hundreds of angels I represent are looking at this space and hope to invest in some companies that can help decarbonize also this space, so our pets can continue to enjoy food in a more environmentally responsible way.
Thank you. And do you also see then a link from your investment perspective between kind of the human food trends in that kind of moving more towards meat replacement products and the pet space as well, from an ingredients perspective, and companies you invest in, or it's really food and pet?
I think there's a lot of the technologies that are coming online, whether it's cultivated meat or plant-based protein, are also relevant for the pet food space for various reasons. Can be driven by health concerns, that you think it could be better for your pet, environmental concerns, other reasons. So allergies, for example, some pets can't handle the conventional foods, so maybe you use insect-based dog food or something instead. So there are different drivers, I think.
Maybe to you, Therese, is how do you assess the scalability and the potential for the growth of a startup? Because you specifically mentioned this is a more mature market and you're looking for growth. So how do you, what factors are you looking at?
Yeah, so we really look for sustainable business models that can, of course, scale. So there are different things. First, looking at the market dynamics, seeing if this proposition fills a gap or a need that's in demand. And what the barriers to entry are, how easy it is to translate into other geographies, if there is a clear disruption happening. So we really try to look for companies that can become category winners, do things better for the world, for people or users or animals for that matter. So strong brands that have a clear long life in our society, both having the potential for strong growth, but also long-lasting growth and a clear place in the world, and the future of the world that we want to see.
I see you nodding, Benson. Do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I think that's one of the hardest things, right? Like defensibility of your competitive advantage. I think then that's like the holy grail is like super high growth, but combined with just sustainable, not just the growth, but once you've grown to that position, can you maintain it? Can you continue to exist at that level? For a little of an aside, not necessarily about this industry, but I was just listening to a podcast episode about Microsoft, and it's so interesting that started in 1975 and it's still the biggest company in the world, or has grown to be the biggest company in the world. And it's both, can you grow very quickly, but also once you've grown, can you continue to have this stickiness and evolve from there? So not every Microsoft is an extremely rare example, but it just shows that you could be that company from 1975 that still feels super relevant today, right? Doesn't feel like a company from that, in my eyes.
Therese, when we were talking the other day, you also said that you get a lot of questions today from companies you get in contact with, or startup scale-ups. What is kind of the trajectory for investment? Which kind of route to go? So my question relates to that is what other paths or strategies you recommend?
No, I think the questions that I get have really changed over the last couple of years or so, when founders are more and more aware of that there's not one route for everybody. And I think that's a very healthy conversation to have. And I think it's important, even when you raise your first equity, to really think about, first of all, how much you're going to raise, because that's very different for each business, what you need. And then from what type of investor, or is it even an investor? Is it debt maybe? There are different routes, and depending on what kind of business model you have, or there are different investors that will suit you better, or different types of equity. So that's a conversation I have a lot now, and I think it's important to have early on, and think also not about just your first race or next race, but the long trajectory. Will you need money again? When? Will these investors be helpful then, or will I only raise once and then I'm done with that? So these are things to think about very early on, and it's a very important conversation to have. I think a lot of founders that raised 5, 6, 7 years ago kind of regret, unfortunately, the way they did things when the market was booming and everybody was raising maybe as much as possible at high valuations, thankfully, but also valuations that have been hard to live up to.
Thank you. Daniel, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we live in a very different world compared to 3 years ago when money was free. And it's been a big struggle, not just for startups, but also for a lot of investors who did invest at high valuations. A lot of their portfolio companies have no viable path towards IPOs or acquisitions. So it's a really challenging time also for a lot of investors. I think as a startup founder, you have to hustle even harder in terms of financing your startup. Could be grants or other non-dilutive sources of funding. Could be angels, family offices, philanthropies, other more patient forms of capital, and of course, debt funding when you get to a certain size. But I think it's a great reminder that VC money is also not for everyone, because it puts you on a certain path that forces you to make certain decisions that might not be in the best interest of your company, because the VC wants an exit within 10 years. And maybe you don't want that. So you have to be really thoughtful about who you get in bed with.
How do you support then some partnerships or startups? Beyond kind of, it's a bit different for you, but kind of what do you bring to the table as not terms of capital, but like
So. Like I said, I think we're in a different position than a typical investor in that if we invest, it's more to acquire, we see synergies with our business, but we also do seek to do that as well. But fundamentally, I guess the main ways we work with other companies is through partnerships. And the way I would see it is that just in the course of what we're trying to build, which is this platform for kind of matching readers and consumers and rescuers and consumers, we get to know consumers at the time when they're about to become pet parents, right? And that's very valuable information that makes us a powerful distribution channel for whatever it is within pet care. Because we will lose a consumer for our products. We will see a consumer once every 10 years, right? So you're not looking for a dog every year. That would be very strange. But that at the same time, we have a very strong position at the time, the most critical part in your journey, which is finding a pet. And so anything that is in the early life part of your journey. So now we work with this exact example, which is Purina app on dog training. We have worked with many pets before, and now we're actually switching to another insurer. So those two areas we've seen as like very important, both for our users, like it's very value adding, but also we have a stronger right to introduce a partner at that time. And it's one of those things that it makes, again, commercial sense. It helps our partners, but also makes it much better for the person getting a pet, right? So in Sweden, if you take insurance, it's about 90% penetration of pet insurance. In the UK, it's 25%. In other markets, even less. And as vet costs, especially in the UK, went up a lot, we saw a lot of people had to give up their pets because they didn't realize how expensive veterinary costs would be. And that's something that is avoidable, obviously, if you are informed, you can make that decision early on, and especially if you can partner with the right insurance firms that make it affordable for you to take care of your pet. So just creating an ecosystem where it's a win-win-win for all parts through our kind of distribution channels.
Thank you. And how is that for you, Daniel, with what you said in your introduction, with all the hats you're wearing, what is beyond kind of capital, what are other value-added services you offer for the audience, the startups, scale-ups in the group?
I think a lot of early-stage startups share similar challenges. Of course, funding, recruiting a great team, press, PR, visibility, getting your name out there. There's a lot on the go-to-market side, and sometimes there's just crazy situations emerging where you try to like I had a startup in Serbia. The co-founder showed up drunk and pulled a gun at the other co-founder. And I was like, if he was wearing Adidas 3 stripes pants, he just confirmed all my prejudice about that region. But there's life happens, and I think it's been challenging also from my point of view, because a lot of these founders have struggled so much in the last couple of years with the market downturn, and you sort of absorb all their darkness and challenges, and you have a constant guilty conscience that you're not able to help them more. But of course, you try to provide them tools and resources and support to be there for them, and try to make their life a little easier, because I think that's what matters, that they know that you're there for them when they need you. Just like, I think that's the least you can do. So it's so much more than just providing capital, it's also being there for them.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Nordics. So there's a lot of scale-ups now, or also, we spoke about First Bet, but we also spoke about, we know Oatly, Spotify, so there's a lot coming from the Nordics. Can you give some examples to this? We'll start with you. Some maybe of the pet space, or otherwise from other companies you've worked with, but you're really seeing scaling up and being very successfully internationally.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a few good ones. Of course, we've followed the Oatly journey since 2016, and that has been a great proof point that Nordic brands can really take on the global stage. Super interesting journey. I think other examples, there are, Spotify, Klarna, and many others. But I think what's interesting here is that so many companies, both product, services, all types of companies, have been created from the start with a quite global mindset, because the region we're very proud of it, but it's not huge. And we have high ambitions, many of us, and want to get out in the world. So just like in the Baltics, for example, these companies also feel like they're created with a global mindset and brand from the very beginning, which makes it a lot easier when you take the step to other markets. So we've seen a lot of strong brands traveling across different regions, and I think we will see even more in the years to come, because now we have many that have led the way from H&M and IKEA to more recent strong brands that have very quickly become world leaders in their categories.
Is there anything specifically different here happening in any of the Nordic countries? Why this? What is the reasons behind it for some of the other countries, maybe in Europe?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, when you are from one of the Nordic countries, you need to be, you're quite global in your mindset already, because of just the way society is here. English, is everybody speaks English. You watch American television, So you have that in your DNA already, and we have the privilege of having a good welfare system, education. All of that plays into also having the opportunity to think beyond your local market. And I think that is reflected in the companies we build.
Daniel?
You can hear them saying that.
You need to have a really good entrepreneurial ecosystem. It takes a village to raise a child, right? So it's a combination of, you have access to capital, there's role models, there's talent, there's good policy, there's distribution, there's a culture of entrepreneurship. And I think what's really interesting is we've seen a growing impact ecosystem as well with Norskin, they announced today, I think, a $400 million fund, which is like their third or fourth fund, focused on impact. The co-working spaces and an accelerator and so many initiatives, and they've grown to Barcelona and Rwanda now. So there's a good fundamental entrepreneurial ecosystem which is conducive to startups, but then there's the impact layer on top where people sort of care about sustainability and other issues, and I think that's a great advantage because take the US. I mean, I'm Swedish American. In Sweden, we recycle like 90% of packaging. And when I lived in the US, and you'd ask someone like, "What do I do with these old batteries?" and people like throw them in the trash. "What do I do with these old medicines? Just flush them down the toilet." It was really shocking that like the environmental awareness was just so low. And I think if you're a Swedish or Nordic company and you have high ambitions in terms of sustainability, that's a competitive advantage when you go to other markets because you've already achieved, a high level from the get-go. So I think that's an advantage as well.
Just to maybe slightly contrary view, I think it's also important to remember kind of Nordic versus Sweden. And I think if you think about, okay, Sweden is actually overrepresented versus the rest of Europe versus other Nordic countries. And kind of what makes Sweden very successful is, I think, a combination of like depth of capital markets, very deep, very broad. Like you can do. I mean, if you think about that, we have EQT, Nordic Capital, like big funds globally that also kind of are based in Sweden. At the same time as the fact that you've had startups that have been successful, and that the people who worked at those startups then go on to found other startups, and you create that. So it's something that also compounds. At the same time, just more to say that like we shouldn't say like, okay, all the things that are important for Sweden on the base, like being small, therefore everything international important. But I think there's still a journey to be made in other countries to match kind of what we've done in Sweden. I think it's important because at the same time we also have to think about we're still not as advanced as we should be versus kind of American startups, or how they think and how much more willing they are to break things. I think that's actually the biggest, like we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back too much to see like, okay, are we really, because every time I see an American startup that then becomes successful, my initial thinking is this doesn't work. I don't believe in it, because it's just like the way you are raised as an European is like, it has to be much more logical to begin with, than kind of it would make sense. So I've always been like kind of like semi-skeptical to Spotify, for example. Like, what are they ever going to make, like, or DoorDash or Uber? But clearly, if you just like have a vision, go for it, and you have even deeper and more believing capital markets, you can do it. So we should also take a look at kind of what do they do in the US and Silicon Valley and get inspiration from there. So I'm not disagreeing necessarily, but more also we should also push ourselves to be better.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting what you said, that there's also differences between the four different countries. So sometimes from the outside, Nordics is seen as one, but it is, four very different countries. And I think, Daniel, you also mentioned just like something on policy. So do you also see, for example, stimulation for the startup scene from government, like from, funding or, early subsidies, whatever you call it, government support to kind of, stimulate it? Is there a difference between the countries in your experience?
Not so much in food tech. I can say that it's Denmark is really advanced when it comes to supporting plant-based, but other than that, it's not huge differences. But there's definitely the ecosystems are at different levels of maturity. Like the Norwegians are all about aquaculture and fish, so there's definitely differences in what kind of software startups and different food tech and ag tech startups do emerge here, from my point of view. But I don't think there are huge differences between the Nordic countries in terms of government support for the startup scene. But it's clear to me that, for example, Sweden, Finland, maybe Denmark to some degree have been more successful building an entrepreneurial sort of startup culture than Norway, for example. Like I can't name like 3 Norwegian brands, startups. I just can't. Whereas I could probably name 30 Danish and Finnish and Swedish. So there are clear differences, of course, in the ecosystems.
Yeah. Is there any insights or advice what you have for our Nordic friends here to start, local ventures in the Nordics, or to how to accelerate it?
I think I've started just my kind of off the top of my head. One thing is just like we just discussed. I mean, think about your market carefully. Like, I think it's always good to start. It's often good to start in your home market just to test out things, but then think about what is the next market. Doesn't have to be. So if you start in Sweden or Norway, the next market doesn't have to be Sweden or Norway or Denmark. It can be Germany or UK or US. I think this is typical advice of go to a big town market. There's obviously trade-offs. I'm sure David later on will talk about the US and all that comes with being the US. But you should be very careful about the market you choose. That's kind of one of the most important things you will decide is okay, what markets are we playing in and why? And why do we have a right to win in that? And then the second thing is you have a huge advantage of being in a relatively dense or in an area in the Nordics, I think, where people are really willing to help out. And there are people who have done kind of similar journeys. So one shouldn't feel like, I'm always happy when people reach out on LinkedIn and want to ask advice or want to discuss, etc. And I found that to be the case also if I reach out. So people are very open. So you should use that kind of to your advantage. So kind of pick your market right and leverage the unique advantage of having people in the same region who are very open to help you out in different contexts. That's what I would say. And the third one is, like we discussed, think very carefully about how you fund the whatever it is that you do, because there are benefits and drawbacks to any kind of financing model. But I think especially VC is best for things where it's a huge TAM opportunity and you want to quickly prove out that you can take a significant portion and then everything else can works out, rather than if you are trying to build, not everything has to be a big TAM opportunity that you build, right? Something can be like, okay, I've found a good niche, it's going to work, it's going to be dependable, stable cash flows, then VC is not the right way, right? So just being nuanced about that ahead of time, done to an end.
To add to that, I think we mentioned it before, but since we are in a segment, a pet segment, that there is a lot of innovation and it's a quite mature segment in many ways already in the Nordics, especially. You just make sure that your vision and mission and your product or service is bold enough and disruptive enough that there really is a place for it and that is different enough from what's out there already. So that's one thing. And then what was the other? Oh yeah, and also that you build something that is not for today, because the journey is long. It's going to take years and years, and hopefully your company will be there in many years to come. So don't build something for today that will fly off the shelf tomorrow, but something that you think will also be very relevant in 10, 15, 20 years. So push yourself on the sustainability angle, on the brand, disrupting, turning things upside down to really create something that you want to see in many years to come.
I can get this to work. There we go.
We're good. I would say focus on sales. Because I've seen so many founders with so many vanity metrics. They're like, we got covered in TechCrunch and I got to speak on a panel at an event and our website just hit 100,000 visitors and we recruited a great chief marketing officer and we opened a fantastic space and we have a food truck and we're doing this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, what about sales? Well, sales will come next year. That's according to the plan. But it's eventually reality catches up with you. So I think just focus relentlessly on sales and listening to your customers, and everything else will follow. You'll get your TechCrunch coverage, but focus on servicing your customers and sales, and everything else will follow.
Great. Thank you very much. So now we have some time left for questions from you. So anybody who would like to ask the question to the panel, go for it. Yes, you had a raised hand or not? Which, yeah. Get to
this how is that area or is I'd Seabrist?
So the question was how to get from kind of the Nordics into mainland Europe. Is there any barriers?
Well, I think that really depends on what type of business you have. Some things are easier to translate to other geographies. Like, for example, if you have a food brand, that's much easier. But if there's something that requires regulatorily, or if you're involved in vet clinics or something like that, it's of course much more tricky to just move across country borders. So it really depends.
I would echo that. I mean, for us, it hasn't been we have a full digital platform product, so it hasn't been a challenge to scale across to Europe. There's always, I mean, above everything else, we should always be careful about how important localization is for your specific segmental product. There's a classic example, Amazon, when they opened in Sweden, did the, AI translation, and people were like, what the hell is this? In that case, it ended up being important because people were already suspicious and made them feel unsafe on that site. So, even when it is easy, which Amazon has a super scalable product, you have to think a little bit about what do people care about in that market.
But that's a great example, and it also comes down to execution. So when you do go to a new market, the people that will run this effort, that's the most crucial things. Your proposition is probably great already, but execution is what will make it work or not. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, go.
Hi, I'm Siad van Zijde from Pet Cars from the Netherlands. Thank you for your insights. We are in the pet tech, event here. What kind of tech makes you, as an investor, most exciting to invest in, apart from AI and the system?
I could say for us, I mean, again, operator, and like we look at investing as well. I think this goes against food, but I really like kind of digital platform services or products because it's the classic, software game. You build it once, then your marginal cost to serve is super cheap for the following. And I think it's all about like creating new ways to achieve similar dynamics or new business models. So again, outside of tech or outside of pets, I really like companies that think differently about how you do something, right? So if you think the company that no one likes, Temu, this shopping brand, which is bad for a lot of reasons, but they kind of fundamentally rethought retail, which is Amazon has gone all the way to same hour delivery. You look at a product and it's outside your door. Their whole concept is, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the product when you order it, and therefore we're going to take away inventory. And that's the fundamental rethinking of how kind of retail works. Costco is very similar in my view. That is all retail thinks about footfall, right? Like there's no store in the world that doesn't want people to come in. Costco has membership only systems that if you try to come in and you don't have a membership, they say you can't come in. But if you do have a membership, or their whole point is that we earn money on the membership so that when you come in, everything's sold at margin. So it's either, anything software that's actually scalable, I really like, or if you're not in software, you have to actually, kind of what Therese was saying, why do you need to exist? If it's especially in if you're one more company in that segment, what's your unique, what are you doing that's going to be different for the future?
And maybe just quickly, also any tech that will, enable a positive ESG impact, whether it's in a product, production, supply chain, is of course a win-win for everybody.
I would say anything that makes our food system more environmentally sustainable and nourishing, and that of course includes pet food.
Hi, I'm going with Tom. In partnership with how avoid these positions and language for the UK company making it.
So the question, So for the whole room, in case you didn't hear the question, so how important is localization of language in the Nordics? So adapting from UK language, for example, or whatever language into the Nordic.
I can definitely take. I can I can take this one because we've done the whole. Our biggest market is the UK, even though we're a Swedish company, and we do everything in English, and then we tend to translate even back to Swedish. And there are a lot of things that don't translate if you do. We've also done a generative AI based to like touch up stuff, but then it's like furry friend does not translate well to any language at all. And the whole point is like, so you have to be very conscious about how you do it. So don't use a lot of idiomatic expressions, or you have to actually do it carefully, right? So yeah, I mean, if you are thoughtful about how you do your copy and you're like standardized, it can work. But for us, we've learned that like actually it's very hard, especially in pet, where you have a lot of like cutesy words that are just impossible to standard translate. No, I think you should definitely. So, what's your product?
Not like small binding for people.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's similar for us. So I would say if you keep your messaging kind of neutral and like factual, that doesn't need a lot of work to translate. I think it's when you start to become like, super specific of like, we want to have languages specific to pets. That's actually very different for each market. So I would be very careful to translate that appropriately.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, from Correlation. Thank you, guys. Why? Just the question, any insights on why insurance penetration in OSGD Sweden is so high versus like
we looked a lot at the space because, like I said, we think insurance is very important at the early stage of rearming a pet. I think it's a lot of factors, and it's mostly my hypothesis having looked at the space rather than like knowing. But I think it's a combination of like already Sweden and the Nordics are very regulated from a, let's say, microchipping, etc. perspective. We were discussing it yesterday in the UK. You have like 24 different microchip databases. None of them speak to each other, so no one is forced to like think they have ownership for their pet. So in line with like pet humanization affirming regulations being in place in the market, like in Sweden, where everyone has insurance for their kids, let's say, or a lot do, then of course you're going to have for your pet as well. So it's how far you've come that way, and it's also, I guess, also how available and fairly priced those products are, because like everything else, the more there is of it, the lower the marginal cost, right? So I think it's relatively cheap for an Agria in Sweden to insure a puppy, given that there's such a large pool, compared to similar Agria in the UK.
I think we then and the sorts of
Right.
Hey, I'm sure it's house eyes one.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And different countries have different laws about requirements for insurance for like liability, pet health, and so on, and that also drives it. So regulation is definitely a driver, and as well like pet humanization.
Right. We have time for one last question. Yes, go for it.
You such sort of part that's affected it. But what drain into the default AI and this is in terms of the available on how that will be impact the health of the pets in long term. The right after condition and this here is that who knows.
I'm not an expert on the pet market. There's of course a mega trend that industries that are analog tend to get digitized, and I guess that's true here as well. If that's the question, and anything that software will eat the world. Anything that can be digitized will be. Food and construction are the least digitized industries, so we got a lot of work to do there. Pets, I don't really know. Maybe you've...
No, I agree with you a lot, Daniel. But I guess your question was also like more to what your expertise is, Daniel, around do you think that the kind of novel food, more environmentally sustainable, is also more healthy for pets? Is that something you find? Same for humans? Is it healthier for pets as well? Or is that not known yet?
We don't know. That's the exciting, crazy thing about food, right? We mapped the human genome 20 years ago, the Human Genome Project. Now, it cost a few $1 billion. Now you can do it yourself for a few $100s. We haven't done the same for food. We know there's 26,000 biochemical compounds in food, like a broccoli has 1,500 biochemical compounds. Out of those 26,000, we tracked maybe 100 or 150. So there's this nutritional dark matter. We don't really know how the food we're eating are impacting us and our gut health. And of course, that's true for pets as well. I guess, 5 to 10 years from now, we should have a more granular understanding of how food actually impacts us. And then we can start to personalize diets for humans, but also personalize diets for our pets based on what we need on an individual level. Because we know on a population level what people should and should not eat. But we don't really, we know, but we don't follow the guidance. So none of us. Mom, all our mothers told us to eat our vegetables, and we don't.
Great. Last part of the question.
Just I didn't see you actually up, but as we can folk in turn, we tried as an insect thing, tech food company, and we tried to have the dialogue in the Nordic, but we didn't have there or not.
Great. All right. Thank you, Rudy.
Don't be